So today we're just talking about operant conditioning. I think that this deserves to be its own separate video, and it's information that I want everyone to be able to get. So operant conditioning is basically where we teach the dog to operate its environment. So it learns how to get what it wants, how to stop what it doesn't want, etc. Operant conditioning was developed in 1937 by B.F. Skinner. He's a psychologist. And you'll notice that a lot of the dog training principles we talk about are things that people discovered for human psychology that actually applies to a lot more than just humans. Essentially, with operant conditioning, it's just math. So it's transactional. When we talk about classical conditioning, which is a whole different topic, classical conditioning is emotional. It's a very emotional response. Operant conditioning is just adding and subtracting. It's just math. What can I add or subtract to increase the behavior? What can I add or subtract to decrease my behaviors? Things like that. So that's what we're going to be going into today. So the first quadrant of operant conditioning that we're going to talk about is going to be positive reinforcement, which is occasionally abbreviated as +R. And it's really crucial to not think of positive and negative as good and bad in this scenario. Because when we break down these concepts, we're saying positive reinforcement. Positive means to add something. Reinforcement means we're giving a reward that's going to increase the likelihood of that behavior. So we want to see more out of that behavior. It's important to keep in mind that the dogs decide what is rewarding. They decide what is a punishment. And that's going to change between dogs. So what one dog may find as a reward, like pet and praise, another dog that's maybe less social may find that to be more of a punishment than a reward. So an example I have here of positive reinforcement is I'm trying to train my dog to bark. So I hold my dog's favorite toy out in front of her. When she barks, I'm going to give her the toy. So that's my positive reinforcement. I'm adding, and then the toy is something she wants, so I'm adding something she wants. And over time, she'll start learning that barking is what gets her that toy. So I'm going to increase the likelihood of my dog barking. Our next quadrant is going to be negative reinforcement. So negative means we're subtracting, we're taking something away. And reinforcement means we're trying to increase the likelihood of that behavior. So we're trying to reinforce that behavior. So for negative reinforcement, we're taking away something the dog does not like. So negative reinforcement, we're taking away something the animal doesn't like. And in this example, I really like to use the car seatbelt alarm because I think this is something that almost everyone has an experience with. So when you get into your car without putting on your seatbelt and you start your car and you start driving a little bit, there's an annoying little bell sound that goes off in your car, ding, 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 and there's sometimes a flashing seatbelt light. And that's telling you put your seatbelt on. It is a noise that they made for us to dislike as humans, so we put our seatbelt on to stop the noise. That's going to be that negative reinforcement. Me putting my seatbelt on took away the uncomfortable experience of having to listen to that sound. So next time I get in my car, before I even start my car, I might just put my seatbelt on. I'm increasing my likelihood of the behavior of putting my seatbelt on because I'm now avoiding the sound I didn't like. So that's negative reinforcement. So our next quadrant is going to be positive punishment, and this is abbreviated with +P. And breaking it down, positive, we're adding something. Punishment means we are giving an unpleasant experience to decrease the likelihood of a behavior. And just like when we're talking about positive reinforcement, where the dog decides what is the reinforcing factor there, the dogs are also going to decide what the punishment is. And again, that's going to look different for every dog depending on their temperament and experiences as well. So a good example for positive punishment is if you're an athlete and you're playing in a game and maybe you get a little bit disrespectful to the referee during the game. Your coach pulls you aside, makes you do 50 push-ups, so he's adding something unpleasant to your experience. And then in the future, you might try to be a little bit more respectful to those referees because you remember having to do those 50 push-ups and it wasn't a very good time. So we're decreasing the likelihood that the athlete is going to be rude to referees in the future because we've given him that punishment. And finally, we're talking about negative punishment. So we're taking away something, and it's going to be an unpleasant experience because it's a punishment. So this is actually probably the strongest quadrant for certain dogs. If your dog is very drivey, they have a lot of want for something, this is actually going to be more adversive than positive punishment most of the time. An example of negative punishment would be if I want my dog to sit before I set my food bowl down for them, and as I'm setting it down, the dog breaks that sit and stands up, I'm going to remove the food bowl away, so I'm taking away the thing the dog wants. Taking away, creating an unpleasant experience. And then when the dog sits back down, then we can kind of rinse and repeat. But over time, the dog learns that when I get up out of that sit, the thing I want is going to go away. So this is a very basic explanation of operant conditioning, and there's a whole lot more layers to this. I'm still discovering new layers, and I've been training dogs for almost about 5 years now. So it is something that is a skill and you will continue to build a new understanding for. Because the examples I give here are very, very simple. We're only discussing like one quadrant at a time, but realistically, we're stacking quadrants when we are training dogs. You kind of practice when you're training your dog in your head, thinking what quadrants am I using, how am I, what am I doing to increase or decrease my behaviors and things like that. Over time, you'll become a lot better versed in these concepts. And it is a fairly complicated topic that I know a lot of dog trainers still don't understand. If you understand this as a pet owner, your life is going to be a lot easier, whether you're teaching a new trick or continuing ones you already have.